I wasn't sure that I'd have enough for a full podcast this week, but then I started looking through my finished objects and my works in progress and decided that I do. So grab a snack or a beverage and let's get started. Hi, welcome to Musing Maker. I'm Harriet. I've been a knitter and crocheter for over 40 years now, and a couple of years ago I learned to spin and to weave as well. This channel is where I come to talk about my various works in progress and the challenges that I get up to in the field of the fiber arts. My hope is that you'll find material here that's interesting or useful to you on your own fiber arts journey, and that you'll like and subscribe and come back again and again. Okay, so let's start with finished objects or nearly finished objects. And the first finished object that I have to tell you about is the Sophie hood. So this is a pattern by Petite Knit. It's a popular, famous pattern. I'll try to put some footage of me wearing my Sophie hood. It's coming real handy here on the East Coast where temperatures have been into the teens during the day and single digits at night. So I've made this out of Drops Nepal, and that's a mix of, I believe, wool and alpaca, and the color is the color Deep Ocean. And I made this on 5mm needles, US 8. And it was a really quick knit. It's garter stitch, so it took me, roughly about, I think, 5 days to work on. I actually made a little technique video on how to seam garter stitch using my Sophie hood as an example, and so I will put a link to that in the description down below, and you can go check it out, and hopefully it will be helpful for you. Okay, so the next thing that I want to do is a quick update on my progress on the Master Hand Knitter certification. This summer I did a bunch of videos about my work on level 2 of the program, and I submitted my portfolio in early November, knowing that I would get it back with a lot of suggestions for improvements and revision, and so I am happy to report that my portfolio was returned to me about a week ago, and yes, as expected, I have a bunch of things still to do to resubmit. Most of it involves working swatches and writing directions, so I'm probably not going to post videos about that because, pictures, like images of me kind of seaming small pieces of fabric or staring at my computer screen are obviously not going to be very interesting content. I do have to rework the Argyle sock. So I may be able to make some videos about my progress working on that, but my hope for that then is to maybe by beginning of March at the latest have it ready for resubmission and a second round of review. Okay, so next up, I want to talk about the various works in progress or WIPs that I have. And so I think I'll start with the most recent cast on, and that is the Melt the Ice hat by Paul Neary. So as you can see, it's underway. Full disclosure, I actually had this hat entirely knit and it did not fit me at all, like not even close. And I'm mostly frustrated with myself because as I was working on it, I had this sinking suspicion like this is not going to fit, right? They're telling me to make 6 inches of rib and then after a row or two of stockinette, start the decreases. And yeah, every fiber of my being told me this hat is going to be way too small, but I did what knitters and probably crocheters always do, like, I'm sure it'll be fine. And I finished it and it was not fine, it did not fit. So that's fine. That gave me a chance to kind of go back and redo it and kind of, improve on it a little bit. So I am working on it. I've been using Holst Super Soft in the color Carmine. I knew I was going to say that wrong. And I decided, the first time I worked it, I used the recommended needle size, which was a US 8. And I decided that I did not like the way the ribbing looked. And so this time I have dropped down to using 4mm or US 6 needle, and I like the way the ribbing is looking. I'm actually going to do more than the recommended amount of ribbing, probably about, so the problem with the fit that I had personally, and I looked at some of the project pages, and some people are just fine with it, and other people are like, this doesn't really fit, or I don't like the way it fits. So for me, the issue was I want it to, to be able to roll it up. And so 6 inches would not have given anybody, I think, enough to roll up on it and on the brim. So I'm going to do, I think, about 8 inches of ribbing, and then I'll have, several inches to roll up. I think I'm also going to put in about another inch of stockinette before I start the decreases, and then I may also be putting a row of stockinette in between each decrease. And I'll take notes and put them on my Ravelry project page kind of as I do this. But my thinking is that usually to have a hat that fits me, like in terms of the length, it has to be anywhere between 11 and 12 inches. And so the problem that I had with the original pattern was that with 6 inches of ribbing and then the decreases starting almost immediately after, I think that by the time it was done, the hat itself was only about 8 or 9 inches. Which for me was short even for like a cap, right? It just didn't, it wasn't gonna fit me. And I'm thinking this may actually end up being a gift for a friend of mine who's kind of, in the thick of things with the ongoing problems about immigration. And yeah, I think what I just want to say about that is I feel like, immigration in the United States, I taught American literature for 30 years, and we spend a lot of time talking about, the way that immigration has always been a very fraught issue in the United States, pretty much from the early 19th century on. But I feel like one thing I think that I want to believe that we could all agree on is that we'd like it to be less violent and less chaotic, right? And that unfortunately, violence and chaos too often mark the immigration process in general. And yeah, I want a better world, right? I want a world where that's not happening. So yeah, I'm happy with this hat. My goal with it too is to obviously create a hat that either I or my friend, I may make a second one after I do this, I haven't decided yet, but that you could wear sort of, in that calmer, peaceful world that I envision for myself in the future, and not just have it be sort of a protest statement hat. Okay, so the next project that I'm working on, and it's funny because January seems to have to be all about me using red yarn, which I don't usually use all that much of, but I am enjoying it. I kind of feel like maybe the warm red colors are helping because it's such a chilly January that we've had here. Okay, so my second whip that I've been putting the most time on, I think I just bumped the camera. The second whip that I've been putting the most time on over the last couple weeks is a pattern by Nora Gaughan called, and I hope I'm saying that correctly, called Middlemarch. And I will hold it up so you can see it. I will also maybe put some footage in if it's a little bit easier. Okay, so this is a men's sweater, so it's big and it's gonna take me a while. And so the yarn that I'm using for this is Berroco Ultra Alpaca in the color Carmine. And the needles that I'm using for the ribbing, I'm using a 3.75mm or US 5. And the sweater itself, I am using 4.5mm needles, which is a US 7. So the sweater has a unique construction, right? So you start by casting on around the middle of the chest, and then you knit the cables up, right? So you're knitting the cables flat, and you knit the front and you knit the back, and kind of incorporating the neckline into that, and then you use a 3-needle bind off. This is hard to show it here, but yeah. So you use a 3-needle bind off to join the shoulder seams, and then you join it in the round and just begin knitting stockinette. And it keeps this little front detail right here on the front and the back, carries down along the front. And so, yeah, it took me a little while to do the 2 cable pieces, just because I kept setting it aside and working on something else. But the cable pieces are pretty straightforward. It's not a difficult cable pattern if you're familiar with cable patterns. And then once you kind of get the whole thing joined, you're off to the races, and it's mostly working stockinette. The sleeves will be entirely stockinette, but because it also kind of keeps that little, I think it's like a 6-stitch texture band down the front and the back of it, you do get a little bit of variety, so it's not just constant stockinette stitch in the round. And yeah, I really like it. It's, I know it's going to take me a while because it's a men's sweater, so it's for a friend. And yeah, it's just soft and warm, and the Barocco Ultra Alpaca is really nice, and I'm enjoying it. Okay, so the next project that I want to give you an update on, I actually talked about in a separate video where I talked about some of the long-term big projects that I have on the needles that I'm going to try to make progress on in 2026. And so this one is the Painting Bricks shawl, which is a pattern by Stephen West. And I can show you what I have on it. I haven't worked on this a ton. I worked on, I picked it up and worked on it for a couple of days. And once I did, I realized why I had set it aside. And so I will show it to you and then tell you about my dilemma. Okay, so this is the shawl. And again, I'll put some footage up. I really love this shawl, but I'm running into the, I realized why I set it aside, which is because right now I'm at the point where I could just simply, bind off and be done with it and move on with my life. But I wanted this to be a scrappy shawl project, and I still have, I can show you here. Right, so I still have a lot of scraps. And I have no illusions that I'm going to get through all of the scraps in there. But I kind of would like to make maybe a little bit more of a dent into it. So the other side of that little coin is that I am now at the point where each row on this shawl has over 700 stitches. So, and it's just going to keep adding more stitches. So at the rate that I'm going, if I keep adding more colored stripes to it, I may end up with rows that are going to have like 800, 900, 1,000 stitches, which is going to really slow me down. So I'm sort of, I set it aside because I feel like I need a little bit more thinking on this one. So the wool that I'm using, I have, it's a stash busting project. So I had a lot of this dark color is a now discontinued yarn. It's Cloudborne Fibers limited edition Alpaca Sport, and the color is Fog Heather. And I'm using a 3.75 millimeter needle, which is a US 5. I kind of think I'm gonna probably keep working on it. That said, I'm also very aware that I'm sort of dreading continuing with it because of how long the rows are gonna get. But I don't know, I gotta give it some more thought. In the the same vein, another long-term project that I've been working on that has been going a little bit better than my painting bricks shawl, right? In the sense that I haven't felt quite so overwhelmed by it, is my Battenberg blanket. And I'll put some footage here. I did a short the other day. This is a pattern by Sandra Paul. And what I decided to do with this is basically like every Sunday, I take out a little sandwich bag and I put in 25 colored squares. And my goal is to try to attach 25 of those colored squares per week. And when I was kind of mapping this out mentally, I was like, okay, that'll give me about 100 squares a month that I'm adding. But of course, I wasn't thinking that through, and it's actually far more than 25 colored squares per week that I'm adding, because the way the blanket is constructed, you make the colored squares first and then you start making neutral squares and use those to join the colored squares to one another. So basically over the month of January, I've now, because I've added 25 colored squares per week, I think I've put in about 80 colored squares, which means I've also put in 80 neutral crochet squares. So I've put in close to 200 more squares on the blanket just in this month. And so my hope is to kind of keep doing that at least through the springtime, because practically speaking, I know that once May, June, July start to roll around, I am not going to want to sit with a big, heavy blanket on my lap adding little crochet squares to them. So I feel like this is the time for me to really kind of drill down and work on that project when I know that I can kind of comfortably make progress on it, right? It's cold enough that sitting under this blanket and adding squares to it is actually a really enjoyable process. And I feel like keeping it enjoyable for me is the key to ensuring that I'm going to finish it. Okay, and so if you've been coming here for a while, you know that I am a very non-monogamous knitter. So despite the fact that I have all of these things that I'm working on already, or in the case of my painting bricks blanket or shawl, I'm thinking of it as a blanket because if each row is like 800 stitches, it might as well be. I also decided to have a new cast on, and so I'm going to be working on the Helia sweater. This is a pattern by Joanna Ang, and I'm using Knit Picks Swish worsted in the colorway Dove Heather. And I'm doing that on a 3.5 millimeter US 4 and a 4.5 millimeter US 7. But I only have a very little bit of that particular, of the Helia sweater cast on. I basically did the neckline, so I'll show you that. Okay, so I just have a tiny bit done, right? You knit the neckline in a twisted rib and then you fold it down, and as you can see, I just got to the part where the fun part is starting. It's knit top down in the round, and yeah, it's kind of off to the side waiting for me. But yeah, I like this yarn a lot. It's very soft, it's very squishy. It is a superwash yarn. I think all the Swish yarns are superwash, and but I feel like that's, again, this is another one that I'm making for a friend, so I try to be attentive when I have friends that I'm pretty sure are not going to want woolly wools, to make sure that I pick something that either is a softer woolly wool or just simply make it superwash. And generally when I knit something in a light color, like so anything off-white or gray, I usually do it in superwash just because life happening to knitted garments, especially a sweater or a blanket, I feel like it's just more practical to know that at some point, if you have to wash it, you can put it in the washing machine. Okay, and then the last segment I want to talk about, I generally am a pretty devoted watcher of Roxanne Richardson's YouTube channel. I'll put it in a link down below. And one of the things that she does every February that I really love is she hosts what she calls Finish It or Fix It February. And so if you've got a lot of works in progress that, you know, you want to make some headway on, or things that, you know, you sort of put in timeout because you worked on them and then started not going so well, Roxanne Richardson hosts Finish It or Fix It February, and the idea is that you devote the month to picking out a couple of projects that you're going to focus on finishing or fixing. Right? And she talks about this in, she has a whole playlist of Finish It February videos. And one of the things that, sort of sparked this was that when she was sort of sorting through her various projects, thinking she didn't have a whole lot of works in progress, she found at one point that she had over 40. And she was, upset and mortified, and lots of them were things like second socks. And so she actually spent a year finishing up or frogging or fixing all of these various projects that she had. And then as part of that, her resolution was to never get into that situation again. And so she, once a year, sets aside the month of February to return to projects that she either has to fix or she has to finish. So I have 2 projects that I think I'm going to focus on for Finish It February. I mean, I have a lot of projects that I need to finish, but there are 2 where I feel like, okay, I'm into the home stretch. I can definitely fix those up in a month. And so the first one is I began by making the Stella quilt cushions. This is a pattern by Laura Penrose, and I'm knitting this with Knit Picks Heatherly Worsted for the colors and Swish DK for the gray. And I'm using the US 7 on the colors and a US 8 for the Swish worsted, so I'm kind of mixing and matching to kind of get the right gauge. This is also a stash busting project, and I am well on my way with this project. I need to basically finish the last square. I'm making 4 pillows or cushions, and so I just need to finish the last one, and then I need to go through and begin knitting the backs on them and kind of put them into the inserts. And so I feel like that is something, when I'm thinking for myself about Finish It February, I want to have projects where I kind of have a clear goal in sight. I feel like I'm about to cross the finish line on it, and then I'll have, a nice finished object for it, as opposed to things like my bigger long-term projects that I think are going to take a little bit longer. And then the second Finish It February project that I want to work on are my sailor slippers. So this is a pattern that went viral a while ago. It's by Annie Germain. I did a whole video about knitting them, and what I want to do is basically I've finished the slippers themselves, but I feel like they could be improved. So I may do a video about this in the future, I don't know, like a kind of sailor slippers glow up. So to make them both more comfortable and more practical, my plan is to add insoles to them and outsoles as well, because otherwise the sole of the slippers is very slippery. And I'm also, as I've been sort of thinking through what I want to do with that, I may also want to try to embroider some kind of something on them to make them look a little prettier. I mean, not that they're not pretty the way they are. I actually really love the yarn, and I may make another pair. But the original pattern had the striping, and I just wasn't interested in having striped slippers, so I made them a solid color. And then in the back of my mind, I sort of thought, well, you could actually maybe embroider a design on the toe of them, right, or the top of the foot. And so that's something that I think that I would like to do during Finish It February. So I feel like those are the 2 projects, my Stella quilt cushions and my slippers, where I definitely can make some headway on those. And, February is a short month, so that'll be something that I think I can get done in that time. Okay, so that's it for my podcast roundup for the month of January. Again, if you haven't subscribed, please do. It helps get the algorithm pushing this channel out to more people. And I hope to see you back here in February. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great week.